He was just a traveler. But when the ship failed, even the alien pilots gasped as the human Taekwu Kim did not want to be on the spaceship. Not at all. He was a man who studied alien cultures, and he had planned to spend his year off doing quiet research at Ganymede Station. His small apartment there had a view of Jupiter that never failed to make him feel both small and important at the same time. That was where he belonged. But then came the letter from the United Earth Council. They had picked him for a special program with the Vosine, the most advanced alien race humans had met so far. And now here he was on the biggest Vosine ship, the Horizon Breaker. He was the only human among 2,300 aliens. This is a great honor, his boss had told him. A big step for human-Vosine relations. Taekwu didn't feel honored. He felt like a token, a box to check. The only reason he was here was because the treaty said there must be one human on the ship. He was that human. Nothing more. The Vosine looked like walking crystals. Their bodies were made of hard, shiny parts that clicked when they moved. They had been traveling between stars for hundreds of years. Humans had only figured out how to do that about a century ago. The Vosine acted like humans were clever children who had finally learned to tie their own shoes. Taekwu's room on the ship was small but comfortable. The bed was too hard, the air too dry, and the gravity just a bit too strong. But he could live with it. The food was the worst part. The ship's computer tried to make human meals, but it always got something wrong. Spaghetti that tasted like plastic, apples that were too sweet, coffee that tasted like dirt. 3 weeks into the trip, Taekwu had spoken to almost no one. He spent his time reading about Vosine culture on his tablet and avoiding the curious stares of the alien crew. He had learned to walk with his eyes down, moving quickly from his room to the food hall and back again. His room was next to a Vosine engineer named Virtala. She had tried to talk to him a few times. She seemed just as uncomfortable as he was, her crystal arms clicking nervously when she spoke. "Human Taekwu, how is your comfort level today?" she would ask when they met in the hallway. "Fine. Thank you," he would answer, and that was all. He didn't want to be rude, but he didn't know how to have a real conversation with a being so different from himself, and he suspected she felt the same way. On the 23rd day of the trip, Taekwu was sleeping when he felt his body float slightly off the bed, then drop back down. The gravity had turned off for just a second. He yawned and turned over. On human ships, that happened all the time. The gravity would flicker, the lights would dim, the air would get stuffy. Human technology was good, but not perfect. He was almost back asleep when his door chimed. He groaned and got up, pulling on a shirt. When the door slid open, Virtala stood there. Her crystal body reflected the dim hall lights in patterns across his walls. "Human Taekwu, you felt the gravity disruption?" she asked. Her voice came from a small box on her chest that translated her crystal vibrations into sound. "Call me Take," he said. This wasn't the first time he had told her this. "And yes, just a small gravity problem. Happens on human ships all the time." "Not on Vosine vessels," Virtala said. Her translator box couldn't show emotion, but her crystals were clicking rapidly. She was upset. "I have asked Central Engineering. They say all systems are working right, but I have worked on 17 long-range vessels and this is not right." Taekwu was fully awake now. "You think there's a real problem?" "I do not know. My job is to make sure the waste recycling systems work. I am not part of the propulsion team." Her crystals flashed blue, which Taekwu had learned meant frustration. "But I know when a ship feels wrong." Taekwu nodded. He understood that feeling. Some things you just knew in your bones. "So what do we do? We?" Virtala's crystals shifted to a surprised yellow. "Yes, we. You came to me, right? So what's the next step?" Virtala was quiet for a moment. "I can access the ship's diagnostic computers from my workstation, but I am not trained to read the propulsion data." "I'm not either," Taekwu admitted, "but I've spent time on ships. Sometimes a fresh set of eyes can spot something the experts miss." The next morning, they met in Virtala's workroom. It was a small space filled with screens showing water flow and waste processing data. Virtala's fingers, thin crystal spikes, tapped quickly on a control panel. "I have accessed the propulsion data from the last 26 hours, she said. "This is not allowed, but I used my emergency override." Taekwu was impressed. "You could get in trouble for that." "Yes, but if there is a real problem, trouble will not matter." She stepped back. "Can you read these?" The screens showed lines and numbers that made little sense to Taekwu at first. But he had studied many alien writing systems in his work, and he began to see patterns. "These are power outputs?" he asked, pointing to a row of numbers. "Yes, from the quantum core. They should be stable." Taikwu looked closer. "They are stable. But look here and here." He pointed to two spots where the numbers dipped slightly. "These drops match the time when the gravity flickered." Virtala's crystals turned a deep blue. "Yes, but the system says these are within normal range." Taikwu thought for a moment. What if the system's definition of normal is wrong? Human machines wear out over time. Their performance drops slowly, but the monitoring systems adjust what they consider normal. Could that happen with Vosine technology? "Impossible," Virtala said quickly. Then she paused. "Or, not impossible, but very unlikely. Vosine systems are self-correcting." "Every system has limits," Taikwu said. "Let's look at older data. From months ago." They spent the next day looking through the ship's records. Virtala had to be careful not to get caught accessing data outside her area. Taikwu helped analyze what they found. The pattern was subtle but clear. The ship's quantum core was producing less power than it had 6 months ago. But the ship's computer had gradually adjusted its definition of normal to match the decline. "We need to tell someone," Taikwu said on the third day of their investigation. "The ship is planning to enter the Shield current soon. If the power is already unstable, that could be dangerous." Virtala's crystals had turned a worried green. "The senior pilot must know. There is one who might listen to us. He is from Earth, like you. His name is Jinho Park." Taikwu was surprised. "A human pilot on a Vosine ship?" "Yes, he trained for many years to qualify. He is highly respected, though some Vosines still doubt a human can truly master our technology." They arranged to meet with Jinho Park that evening. He was older than Taikwu, with gray hair and the straight posture of someone who had spent his life proving himself. "So," Jinho said after they had explained their concerns, "you think the ship's core is failing and the computer is hiding this fact?" "Not hiding," Virtala said quickly. "Adapting its parameters. But the result is the same." Jinho shook his head. "I appreciate your concern, but Vosine systems don't fail like that. They're designed with multiple backup self-healing protocols. All systems can fail," Taikwu insisted. "And when they do, it's often because people were too confident in them to look for problems." Jinho's face hardened. "I've spent 20 years working with Vosine technology. I know its limits. These readings you've found are nothing to worry about." "But," Taikwu started. Jinho held up a hand. "I'll run some extra checks before we enter the Shield current if that will make you feel better. But I suggest you both focus on your own duties and leave ship operations to those trained for it." After Jinho left, Taikwu and Virtala sat in silence for a while. "He will not help," Virtala said finally. "No," Taikwu agreed. "He has too much invested in believing the Vosine way is perfect. What do we do now?" Taikwu looked at the data again. "We keep watching. We prepare for what might happen, and we hope we're wrong." The next day, the ship announced it would enter the Shield current in 48 hours. The Shield current was a special path through space where ships could travel faster than light. It was like a river of bent space that could carry ships great distances quickly. Taikwu couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the subtle power drops, the ship's computer quietly adjusting to a failing system. He had seen something similar on a human ship once, when the engineers had missed signs of a failing reactor, because their instruments had slowly adjusted to the new normal. That ship had been saved because a junior engineer had trusted her gut over the computer. Taikwu wondered if anyone would listen to him, and Virtala, before the horizon breaker, faced a much more serious test. As he finally drifted off to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that this routine voyage was about to become anything but routine. He was just a traveler. But when the ship failed, even the alien pilots gasped as the human. The command center fell silent as everyone watched the displays. The ship was still rocking with the current's pulses, but the violent shaking had stopped. The hull integrity remained steady at 62%. "This is unexpected," the commander said finally. His crystal body glowed with a mix of colors Taikwu couldn't interpret. "But we are not safe yet. We must remain in the current for 7 more hours. Can the core maintain even this reduced power output for that long?" Jinho asked. One of the Vosine officers checked her displays. "Uncertain. Current projections suggest the core will continue to degrade. We may have 4 hours at most before power drops below critical levels." The commander's crystals darkened. We cannot exit the current prematurely. The nearest safe exit point is 3 hours ahead, and even that would leave us far from any habitable system. What if we reduce power demand even further? Taikwu suggested. Right now we're still using a lot of energy to maintain the stabilizers between pulses. What if we reduce them constantly, and just strengthen them slightly during the worst pulses? The Vosine officers looked at him with what he thought might be shock. That would expose the ship directly to the current's forces. One said, "No Vosine vessel has ever done that." "No Vosine vessel has ever faced this situation," Jinho pointed out. "I say we try it." The commander hesitated, then nodded. "Implement the human suggestion. Reduce stabilizer power by another 20%, with 10% surge capacity for major pulses only." As the changes took effect, the ship's rocking motion increased. Taikwu had to grab a railing to keep his balance. Several of the Vosine stumbled, their crystal legs not designed for this kind of movement. "Hull integrity holding," an officer reported. "Power demand down another 12%. "We might make it to the exit point," Jinho said. "But only if the current doesn't throw us any surprises." As if the current had heard him, a massive pulse hit the ship. Everyone was thrown to the floor. Alarms blared again. "Major current shift detected," an officer shouted over the noise. "We are being pulled off course." Taikwu picked himself up and looked at the main display. The glowing path of the current had changed, developing a swirl that was dragging the ship toward one edge. "It's like a whirlpool," he said. "The current is folding back on itself." "This is not on any chart," the commander said. "This section should be stable." "The current is alive in its own way," Taikwu explained. "It changes, develops new patterns. Human ships have reported similar phenomena. Can we navigate around it?" Jinho asked. "Negative," an officer replied. "Our maneuvering thrusters don't have enough power to overcome the pull." Taikwu studied the swirl pattern on the display. "We don't need to fight it. We can use it." "Explain," the commander demanded. "It's like a whirlpool, yes, but also like a slingshot. If we aim for the center, then use a burst of power at the right moment, the swirl itself will throw us forward, maybe even faster than our normal speed." Jinho looked doubtful. "That's a big risk. If we time it wrong, we could be thrown out of the current entirely, or deeper into the swirl." "It's our best option," Taikwu insisted. "Look at our path." He pointed to the projected course on the display. "We're going to be pulled in anyway. At least this way we control how we approach it." The commander's crystals pulsed with decision colors. "Do it. Program the approach vector, and calculate the optimal power burst timing." The next hour was the most intense of Taikwu's life. He worked with Jinho and the Vosine navigation officers to plot their approach to the swirl. They would need to time the power burst to within 1/10 of a second. Too early, and they wouldn't get the full slingshot effect. Too late, and they'd be pulled deeper into the swirl. "We will have only one chance," the commander reminded them. "If we fail, the ship and all aboard will be lost." "We won't fail," Taikwu said with more confidence than he felt. As they approached the edge of the swirl, the ship's rocking increased. The current's forces pulled at them, trying to drag them off course. The navigation officers fought to keep them on their planned approach vector. "Entering swirl boundary in 60 seconds, an officer announced. "All crew secure for extreme turbulence." Taikwu gripped a support rail tightly. Firtala moved next to him. Her crystal form braced against a control panel. "I have never seen a human take control like this," she said quietly. "You are not what I expected." Taikwu managed to smile. "I'm not what I expected either." 30 seconds to swirl boundary, the officer called out. "Power burst prepared," another reported. "All available energy diverted from non-essential systems." 20 seconds. Taikwu watched the swirl grow larger on the display. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, a spiral of glowing energy that seemed to reach out for them. 10 seconds. The ship began to tilt as the swirl's pull grew stronger. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Now," Jinho shouted. The power burst hit with a roar. The ship shot forward into the swirl, spinning as it went. Taikwu felt his body pressed against the wall by the force. The lights flickered wildly. The displays went blank for a moment, then came back on. "We're accelerating," an officer called out. "Speed increasing beyond normal current velocity." "The swirl is throwing us forward," Jinho said, his voice tight with concentration. "Just as Taik predicted." For several minutes they spun through the swirl, the ship groaning with the strain. Then suddenly they were free. The ship straightened out. The displays showed they were back in the main flow of the current, but moving much faster than before. New velocity calculation, an officer announced. At current speed, we will reach the planned exit point in 46 minutes, not 3 hours. A sound like crystal chimes filled the command center. It took Taikwu a moment to realize the Vosine were making their equivalent of cheers. The core, the commander asked. Stable at current output. Power reserves sufficient for the reduced journey time. The commander turned to Taikwu, his crystals glowing with a color Taikwu had never seen before. Human Taikwu, your unconventional approach has saved this vessel. Taikwu nodded, not sure what to say. He had acted on instinct, using what he knew about natural phenomena from his studies. He hadn't expected to become the savior of a Vosine ship. Jinho clapped him on the shoulder. Well done, Taik. I've been flying Vosine ships for 20 years and I never would have thought of riding the current instead of fighting it. It just seemed logical, Taikwu said. Sometimes the path of least resistance is the best one. The next 46 minutes passed intense but hopeful waiting. The ship continued to rock with the current's pulses, but everyone had gotten used to the motion now. The Vosine officers moved with a new rhythm, adjusting their usual rigid postures to flow with the ship's movements. When they finally reached the exit point, the transition was smoother than Taikwu expected. The glowing current faded from the displays, replaced by normal space. The ship's rocking settled into a gentle hum. We have exited the shield current, an officer announced. Position confirmed. We are in the Telos sector, 2.3 light-years from Vosine space. Can we reach a Vosine outpost? The commander asked. Yes, Commander. At reduced speed to preserve the core, we can reach outpost Kalmyra in 4 days. The commander's crystals pulsed with satisfaction. Set course and speed. Begin full assessment of all systems. I want a complete damage report within the hour. As the crew set to work, the commander approached Taikwu. Jinho and Virtala stood nearby. Human Taikwu, your actions today merit recognition. You identified a problem our systems missed. You proposed a solution no Vosine would have considered, and you executed that solution with skill. Thank you, Commander, but I just applied what I knew, and I couldn't have done it without Virtala noticing the problem in the first place, or without Jinho supporting my ideas. The commander's crystals flashed acknowledgement. True. Engineer Virtala showed initiative beyond her station. Senior pilot Jinho demonstrated the flexibility of mind that we value in our non-Vosine officers. Both will be commended. He paused, his crystals shifting to a more formal pattern. But it is you, human Taikwu, who has taught us an important lesson. The Vosine way is not always the only way. Sometimes a different perspective can find a path where we see none. Taikwu felt embarrassed by the praise, but also proud. He had done what xenoanthropologists rarely got to do. He had truly bridged a gap between species, using his human perspective to solve a Vosine problem. I'm glad I could help. Commander, you have done more than help, human Taikwu. You have changed how this crew will approach problems in the future. The commander turned to address the entire command center. Let it be logged that the Vosine ship Horizon Breaker was saved by human insight and Vosine execution. A model for future cooperation. As the commander returned to his duties, Jinho grinned at Taikwu. You've made quite an impression. The Vosine don't change their ways easily, but when they do, it spreads quickly through their network. By the time we reach Vosine space, every ship in their fleet will know your name. I don't need fame, Taikwu said. I just want to complete this journey safely. Too late, Virtala said, her crystals glowing with what Taikwu now recognized as amusement. He was just a traveler. But when the ship failed, even the alien pilots gasped as the human. The 4 days it took to reach outpost Kalmyra were busy for Taikwu. The ship needed many repairs, and although he wasn't an engineer, his new way of thinking was in high demand. The power distribution system is still using the old protocols, a Vosine engineer explained as they stood in a cramped maintenance tunnel. It tries to maintain equal power to all systems even when some need more than others. Like trying to fill different-sized cups with the same amount of water, Taikwu said. Exactly. The engineer's crystals flashed with excitement. We could adjust the system to be more flowing, like your current writing technique. All over the ship, similar conversations were happening. Vosine crew members who had never spoken to Taikwu before now sought him out. asking for his perspective on their systems and procedures. Jinho found him in the food hall on the second day, looking tired but pleased. "You've started a revolution," he said, sitting down across from Taikwu. "The engineering chief told me they're redesigning half the ship's systems based on your adaptive response principles." "I didn't invent anything," Taikwu protested. "I just suggested working with natural forces instead of against them. Sometimes the simplest ideas are the most revolutionary." Jinho took a sip from his cup. "The Vosine have always valued precision and control above all else. The idea of adapting to chaos rather than suppressing it. It's changing how they think." Virtala joined them, her crystal form glowing with new confidence. Since the current incident, she had been promoted to senior systems analyst, a big jump from waste management. "I have been asked to prepare a presentation for Vosine High Command," she announced. "They wish to understand how a human xenoanthropologist and a waste management engineer saved a ship when traditional protocols failed." Taikwu nearly choked on his food. "High Command? As in the leaders of the entire Vosine Confederacy? Yes. They are very interested in what they are calling the Kim approach." Her crystals showed amusement. "You are becoming famous, Taik. I don't want to be famous. I just want to finish my research and go home." Jinho laughed. "Too late for that. The Vosine take innovation very seriously. When someone shows them a better way to do something, they implement it across their entire society. By this time next year, every Vosine ship in the galaxy will be using your techniques." Taikwu groaned. "Can't they name it after someone else?" "Why would they do that?" Virtala asked, genuinely confused. "You created it. The name honors your contribution." Taikwu realized this was a cultural difference he couldn't easily explain. Humans often felt uncomfortable with personal recognition, especially when they felt others had helped. The Vosine seemed to have no such hesitation about assigning credit. "In human culture, we often prefer to share credit for discoveries," he tried to explain. "I couldn't have done anything without you noticing the problem first or without Jinho supporting my ideas in the command center." Virtala's crystals pulsed thoughtfully. "Interesting. Vosine culture values precise attribution. We believe clarity about who discovered what leads to better innovation. Perhaps there's a middle ground," Jinho suggested. "The Horizon approach, named after the ship where humans and Vosine first developed these techniques together." Virtala considered this. "I will suggest it to High Command. It does acknowledge the collaborative nature of the discovery." As they continued to eat, Taikwu marveled at how much had changed. A week ago, he had been a lonely passenger on an alien ship, counting the days until he could go home. Now he was part of something important, a bridge between two species with very different ways of thinking. On the fourth day, they reached Outpost Calmira. It was a massive space station orbiting a small moon, its crystalline structures gleaming in the light of a distant sun. Taikwu watched from a viewport as they docked, wondering what awaited him there. "Impressive, isn't it?" Jinho said, joining him at the viewport. "This is one of their smaller outposts, too. Wait until you see Vosine Prime. Will I be going there?" Jinho grinned. "Oh yes. High Command has requested your presence. You'll be the first human xenoanthropologist to visit their homeworld in an official capacity." Taikwu's heart raced. Vosine Prime was the center of Vosine civilization, a planet that few humans had ever seen. The research possibilities were endless. "When do we leave?" "In 3 days. The Horizon Breaker will undergo repairs here, then continue on a different route. We'll take a faster ship directly to Vosine Prime. Virtala will join us." "What about my original assignment, the diplomatic exchange program?" Jinho laughed. "Taik, you've already done more for human Vosine diplomacy than a year of formal exchanges could have accomplished. Trust me, this is where you're needed now." Outpost Calmira was overwhelming. The Vosine architecture was all sharp angles and crystalline surfaces that reflected light in dazzling patterns. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth standard, making Taikwu feel heavy and clumsy. And everywhere he went, Vosine stopped to stare at him, their crystal bodies flashing with colors of curiosity and respect. "News of your current writing technique has spread quickly," Virtala explained, as she guided him through the outpost. "Many here have never seen a human before, let alone one who has mastered a Vosine ship in crisis." "I didn't master anything," Taikwu insisted. "I just suggested a different approach. That is precisely what they find fascinating. The ability to see beyond established protocols. She led him into a large chamber filled with vosine of various sizes and crystal configurations. This is the knowledge exchange. Scientists and engineers gather here to share discoveries. As they entered, the chamber fell silent. All the vosine turned to look at them, their crystal bodies glowing with intense colors. "They wish to hear from you," Virtala said quietly. "About how you developed your technique." Taikwu swallowed hard. Public speaking had never been his strength, especially not to a room full of alien scientists. But he stepped forward anyway. For the next 2 hours, he explained his thinking about the Shield current, how he had seen it as a natural force to work with rather than against. He described how human ships had traditionally navigated Earth's oceans by understanding wave patterns and wind flows, rather than trying to power through them. The vosine asked questions, their translator boxes struggling to keep up with their excitement. They wanted to know everything: how he had recognized the pattern, how he had known the ship could survive the reduced stabilizer power, how he had calculated the slingshot effect of the swirl. "I didn't calculate anything," he admitted. "I just felt it. Humans have an intuitive understanding of natural patterns because we evolved in a chaotic environment. Earth has weather, seasons, tides, all unpredictable forces that we had to learn to work with." This answer seemed to fascinate them even more. One older vosine, whose crystals had a faded, cloudy quality, stepped forward. "I am Elder Scientist Kirvalan," she introduced herself. "I have studied alien thought patterns for 117 of your Earth years. What you describe as intuition has always been difficult for vosine to understand. We rely on precise calculations and established protocols. But that approach has limitations," Taikwu pointed out. "Sometimes the universe presents situations that don't match any protocol." "Yes," Kirvalan agreed, her crystals pulsing with an intense blue. "This is why your perspective is so valuable. You see patterns where we see only chaos. You find solutions where we see only problems." After the session ended, Kirvalan invited Taikwu and Virtala to her private laboratory. It was a strange space, filled with objects from dozens of alien worlds. "I collect artifacts that demonstrate different approaches to problem solving," she explained. "This is a navigation tool from the water-dwelling Mirasi." She pointed to what looked like a twisted shell. "It uses echolocation rather than visual data. And this," she indicated a small plant growing in a clear container, "is a living calculator from Deneb 4. It solves complex equations through growth patterns." Taikwu was fascinated. This was the kind of xenoanthropological research he had dreamed of doing. "These show how different environments lead to different problem-solving approaches," he said. "Exactly." Kirvalan's crystals glowed approvingly. "And now I will add a new entry to my collection: the human who rode the current. Your approach may revolutionize vosine space travel." "I'm honored," Taikwu said, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "But I'm just one human. We don't all think the same way." "Of course not. But you have demonstrated a capacity that my people need to understand better." She turned to Virtala. "And you, young engineer, showed remarkable flexibility for a vosine. You recognize the value in the human's different perspective." Virtala's crystals flashed with what Taikwu now recognized as embarrassment. "I simply wanted to save the ship, Elder Scientist. And in doing so, you may have helped save our society from stagnation." Kirvalan moved to a control panel and activated a display. It showed a graph with a flattening curve. "Vosine technological advancement has slowed in recent centuries. We perfect what we know, but we rarely discover truly new approaches. This is the danger of a society that values precision over exploration." And he was just a traveler. But when the ship failed, even the alien pilots gasped as the human. The journey to Vosine Prime took only 16 hours. The ship they traveled on was small but incredibly fast, with engines that hummed at a higher pitch than those of the Horizon Breaker. Taikwu spent most of the trip looking out the viewport at the stars streaking by, wondering what awaited him on the Vosine homeworld. "Nervous?" Jinho asked, joining him at the viewport. "A little," Taikwu admitted. "I never expected to visit Vosine Prime. I'm not prepared for this kind of diplomatic role." Jinho smiled. "You weren't prepared to save a ship in the Shield current either. But you managed that just fine. Besides, you won't be alone. Virtala and I will be with you." "And what exactly will we be doing there?" "Meeting with High Command, speaking to their Science Council. Probably some formal ceremonies." Jinho shrugged. "The Vosine love their protocols. But the important part will be the conversations, the exchange of ideas. They want to understand how you think, Tyke, how humans approach problems differently than they do. I'm just one human. I can't speak for our entire species. Of course not. But you've shown them something valuable, a new way of looking at the universe. That's worth exploring further. As they approached Vosine Prime, Taikwu got his first look at the legendary planet. It wasn't what he expected. From space, it looked harsh and barren, with jagged mountain ranges and deep canyons covering much of its surface. There were no oceans, just small scattered lakes that glittered like jewels. Not very hospitable looking, is it? Jinho commented. The Vosine evolved in a high-gravity, low-moisture environment. Their bodies developed crystal structures to withstand the pressure and conserve water. Is that why they're so rigid in their thinking? Taikwu wondered. Their environment had clear, unchanging rules they had to follow to survive. Exactly. Jinho nodded. Whereas Earth is constantly changing, weather, seasons, tectonic activity, humans had to adapt to survive, not just follow fixed patterns. As their ship entered the atmosphere, Taikwu saw the Vosine cities spread out below. They were magnificent structures of crystal and metal, geometric patterns that caught the light of their sun and broke it into dazzling colors. The buildings seemed to grow from the rocky ground as if they were natural formations rather than constructed objects. They landed at a large spaceport outside the capital city. As they disembarked, Taikwu was surprised to see a delegation waiting for them. A dozen Vosine, their crystal bodies adorned with what he guessed were formal markings. High Command representatives, Virtala explained, her own crystals pulsing with nervous energy. This is a great honor. One of the Vosine stepped forward. Its crystal form was larger than most, with complex patterns of gold and blue running through it. Human Taikwu, it said through its translator box. I am High Commander Zalvoran. We welcome you to Vosine Prime. Taikwu bowed slightly, as Jinho had taught him was appropriate. Thank you, High Commander. I'm honored by your welcome. Your actions aboard the Horizon Breaker have caused much discussion among our people, Zalvoran continued. We are eager to learn more about your intuitive approach to cosmic forces. I'll share whatever knowledge I can, Taikwu promised. The delegation escorted them to a large transport vehicle that hovered above the ground. As they traveled toward the city, Zalvoran explained that a series of meetings had been arranged over the next few days. Taikwu would speak to the Science Council, the Space Navigation Authority, and finally to High Command itself. We have also prepared suitable accommodations for you, the High Commander added. We understand humans have different environmental needs than Vosine. Thank you, Taikwu said. I appreciate your consideration. Their accommodations turned out to be a small complex built specifically for non-Vosine visitors. It had softer surfaces, more humid air, and lower gravity than the rest of the planet. Taikwu found it more comfortable than his quarters on the Horizon Breaker had been. Rest tonight, Jinho advised as they settled in. Tomorrow will be a busy day. But Taikwu found it hard to sleep. His mind was racing with the implications of what was happening. He had come to Vosine space as a simple xenoanthropologist, hoping to learn about alien cultures. Now he was being treated as an important diplomat, a representative of human problem-solving approaches. It was both exciting and terrifying. The next morning, Virtala came to escort them to the Science Council. She had been polished somehow, her crystal form gleaming more brightly than before. Is that formal wear? Taikwu asked. Her crystals flashed with amusement. Yes. Vosine apply special compounds to our outer layers for important occasions. I notice you and Jinho have also dressed formally. It was true. Jinho had brought proper diplomatic attire for both of them, simple but elegant suits in the Earth Council style. We want to make a good impression, Jinho said. The Science Council chamber was an enormous dome made entirely of crystal. The sunlight coming through its faceted surface created patterns of light and shadow that shifted constantly. Hundreds of Vosine sat in concentric circles, their crystal bodies adding to the play of light. In the center was a raised platform where Taikwu, Jinho, and Virtala were directed to stand. As they took their places, a hush fell over the chamber. An elder Vosine, its crystals cloudy with age, stepped forward. I am Chief Scientist Kelmoran. Welcome to the Science Council of Vosine Prime. We have gathered to hear the human perspective on adaptive navigation as demonstrated by xenoanthropologist Taekwu Kim aboard the vessel, Horizon Breaker. Taekwu stepped forward, his heart pounding. He had prepared some remarks with Jinho's help, but standing before hundreds of alien scientists was more intimidating than he had imagined. "Esteemed members of the Science Council," he began, "I am honored by your invitation. What happened aboard the Horizon Breaker was not the result of advanced human technology or special training. It was simply a different way of looking at a problem." For the next hour, he explained his thought process during the crisis, how he had seen the child current not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a natural force to be worked with, how he had drawn on Earth's seafaring traditions, where sailors learned to read the winds and tides rather than fight against them. Humans evolved on a planet of constant change, he explained. Earth's weather systems, ocean currents, and even its ground is always in motion. We learned to survive not by controlling these forces, but by understanding them and adapting to them. The council members listened intently. When Taekwu finished, they asked questions, dozens of them. They wanted to understand every aspect of his thinking, every nuance of the human approach to problem solving. "But how can you navigate safely without precise calculations?" one asked. "We do use calculations," Taekwu explained, "but we also rely on pattern recognition, on what we call intuition. The ability to sense how a system will behave based on experience rather than pure data." "Is this skill teachable?" Another council member wanted to know. Could Vosine learn to think in this adaptive way? "I believe so," Taekwu said. "Just as humans can learn to be more precise and methodical, like the Vosine. It's not about changing who we are, but about expanding our perspectives." The session lasted much longer than planned. When it finally ended, Jinho looked impressed. "You did well," he said. "They were genuinely engaged with your ideas." "Indeed," Virtala agreed. "I have never seen the Science Council so animated. Usually presentations are formal and predictable." The next few days followed a similar pattern. Taekwu spoke to various Vosine authorities, explaining the human approach to problem solving. Each meeting seemed to generate more interest, more questions. The Vosine were fascinated by the concept of working with natural forces, rather than trying to control them. On the fourth day, they were summoned to High Command headquarters, a towering crystal structure in the center of the capital. The chamber they entered was smaller than the Science Council dome, but even more impressive. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with light. 7 Vosine sat around a circular table, their crystal forms more complex and layered than any Taekwu had seen before. High Commander Zalvoran introduced them as the ruling council of the Vosine Confederacy. "Human Taekwu," Zalvoran began. "Your presentations have caused much discussion among our people. The approach you demonstrated aboard the Horizon Breaker challenges fundamental aspects of Vosine philosophy." Taekwu felt a flicker of alarm. "I didn't mean to challenge your ways, High Commander. I only offered an alternative perspective. And that is precisely why we have brought you here," another council member said. Its translator box identified it as Subcommander Pirkelat. "For too long, the Vosine have believed our way is the only efficient way to navigate the cosmos. You have shown us otherwise. We wish to propose a new initiative," Zalvoran continued, "a joint human Vosine space exploration program focused on developing hybrid navigation techniques that combine Vosine precision with human adaptability." Taekwu looked at Jinho in surprise. This was far beyond what either of them had expected. "That sounds like an excellent idea," Jinho said carefully, "but we don't have the authority to agree to such a program. That would require approval from the Earth Council." He was just a traveler, but when the ship failed, even the alien pilots gasped as the human Taekwu spent the next day watching the ship prepare to enter the child current. The Vosine crew moved with purpose, their crystal bodies clicking and flashing as they ran tests and adjusted systems. No one seemed worried. No one but Taekwu and Virtala. "I have been checking the power readings every hour," Virtala told him when they met for a meal in the food hall. "There have been 3 more small drops." Taekwu pushed his food around on his plate. The ship's computer had tried to make him rice with vegetables, but the rice was too sticky, and the vegetables had a strange blue tint. "Did you report them?" "Yes, the duty officer said they were still within acceptable parameters." Her crystals flashed with frustration. "I tried to show the pattern, but she would not listen." Taekwu nodded. He understood the problem. The Vosine were brilliant engineers, but they trusted their computers completely. If the system said everything was fine, they believed it. They didn't have the human habit of questioning authority. What about the senior pilot? Jinho? He ran his checks as promised. The results showed no problems. Virtala's voice from her translator box was flat, but her crystals showed worry. But I don't think he looked for the right things. Taikwu sighed. So we just wait and hope? I have one more idea, Virtala said. There is an observation deck where we can watch the ship enter the current. I have access because I sometimes need to check waste disposal sensors there. If something does go wrong, we will see it happen. Maybe we can help. What could we possibly do if professional pilots can't fix it? Virtala's crystals shifted to a color Taikwu hadn't seen before, a deep purple. I don't know. But I would rather try than do nothing. Taikwu found himself admiring her. Despite her fears, she was ready to act. Okay, when do we enter the current? 6 hours from now. Meet me at my workstation and I will take you to the observation deck. The next 6 hours crawled by. Taikwu tried to read, but he couldn't focus. He tried to sleep, but his mind kept showing him images of the ship breaking apart in the shield current. Finally, it was time to meet Virtala. Her workstation was empty when he arrived. He was about to call her on the ship's communication system when she appeared, her crystal form moving quickly down the hallway. Sorry for the delay, she said. I was checking the latest power readings. There was another drop, larger this time. I reported it, but she didn't need to finish. No one was listening. They took a service elevator to a part of the ship Taikwu hadn't seen before. The hallways were narrower here, clearly not meant for passengers. Virtala led him to a small door that opened onto a round room with a huge window. The view took Taikwu's breath away. Space spread before them, black and infinite, spotted with distant stars. Ahead there was something else. A faint glow like a river of light weaving through the darkness. The shield current, Virtala explained. It is a natural phenomenon, a fold in space-time that ships can use to travel faster than light. It's beautiful, Taikwu said. Yes, and dangerous. The current has its own patterns and flows. Ships must navigate carefully or they can be torn apart. That wasn't what Taikwu wanted to hear. And we're going into that with a ship that might have power problems? Yes, Virtala's crystals dimmed. The approach has already begun. Look, the ship was turning slightly, lining itself up with the glowing current. Taikwu could feel a faint vibration through the floor. The quantum stabilizers are engaging, Virtala explained. They create a field around the ship that protects it from the forces in the current. And if they fail, then the current would tear the ship apart. They watched in silence as the ship moved closer to the glowing river in space. Taikwu could now see that it wasn't a steady glow but a shifting, pulsing light, like a living thing. The ship's engines hummed louder. The vibration in the floor increased. Taikwu felt his heart beating faster. How long will we be in the current? 8 hours, if all goes well. It will take us across a distance that would normally take months to travel. The ship was now at the edge of the current. The glow filled their window, beautiful and terrifying. The vibrations grew stronger. Is this normal? Taikwu asked. Yes, the transition is always rough. Once we are fully in the current, it will smooth out. The glow enveloped them. The entire window was filled with swirling light. The ship shuddered, then seemed to settle. The vibrations eased. There, Virtala said, her crystals brightening. We are in the current now. Perhaps our worries were. A loud alarm cut her off. The ship lurched suddenly, throwing them both against the wall. The lights flickered and went out, replaced by dim emergency lighting. What's happening? Taikwu yelled over the alarm. I don't know. Virtala's crystals were flashing in panic patterns. This should not be possible. The ship lurched again. Through the window, Taikwu could see the current's glow pulsing angrily around them. The ship was shaking so hard now that it was difficult to stand. We need to get to the command center, Taikwu said, grabbing Virtala's arm to steady her. Can you get us there? Yes, but we won't be allowed in. Only command crew. If the ship is failing, they might need all the help they can get. Come on. They made their way out of the observation deck and into the corridor. The emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. More alarms were sounding now, and Taikwu could hear the Vosine crew shouting to each other in their own language. The ship lurched again, harder this time. Taikwu was thrown against the wall, pain shooting through his shoulder. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. This way, Virtala called, leading him to another elevator. This will take us to the command level. The elevator was barely working, moving slowly and stopping often. When they finally reached the command level, they found chaos. Vosine crew members were rushing through the corridors, their crystal bodies flashing with colors Taikwu had never seen before. Emergency signals, he guessed. No one tried to stop them as they followed the flow toward the main command center. The doors to the command center were open. Inside, a dozen Vosine officers were gathered around control panels. Jin-Ho Park stood in the center, giving orders in a mix of Korean and Vosine language. His face was tight with stress. The main display showed the ship's position in the shield current. The glowing path was pinching in around them, threatening to crush the vessel. Increase power to the aft stabilizers, Jin-Ho ordered. Try to push back against the current's compression. We cannot, one of the Vosine officers responded. The quantum core is failing to maintain coherence. We have lost 30% of power output. That's impossible, Jin-Ho said. Run a diagnostic. We have run 3 diagnostics. All show the same result. The core is failing. Taikwu and Virtala exchanged glances. This was exactly what they had feared. Jin-Ho saw them standing at the entrance. What are you doing here? This area is restricted during emergencies. We know what's happening, Taikwu said, stepping forward. The quantum core has been showing signs of failure for weeks, but the system kept adjusting its parameters to hide the problem. The ship's commander, a large Vosine with gold flecks in his crystals, turned to them. Explain. Virtala quickly told them about the power drops they had noticed and their failed attempts to warn the crew. Why was this not reported to me? The commander demanded, looking at Jin-Ho. It was reported, sir, but the readings were within acceptable parameters. There was no reason to— The parameters were wrong, Taikwu interrupted. The system was hiding a growing problem by changing what it considered normal. The ship lurched again, harder than before. A control panel sparked and went dark. We have lost stabilizers on the port side, an officer reported. The current is compressing our shields. Hull integrity at 70% and falling. The commander's crystals flashed rapidly. Options? We could try to exit the current, Jin-Ho suggested. Emergency Protocol 3 would eject us from the flow. With a failing core, the transition forces would tear us apart, another officer said. If we stay in the current with failing stabilizers, we'll be crushed anyway, Jin-Ho argued. Taikwu's mind was racing. He had studied the shield current as part of his research on space phenomena. He knew it was like a river with its own patterns and flows. The stabilizers, he said suddenly, they're not failing because the core is weak. They're failing because they're fighting the current. Everyone turned to look at him. What do you mean, human? The commander asked. Your stabilizers are programmed to maintain a perfect bubble around the ship, right? To keep the current's forces at bay? Of course, Jin-Ho said. That's basic current navigation. But what if that's the wrong approach? Look at the flow patterns. Taikwu pointed to the display. The current isn't random. It has rhythms like waves. You don't fight waves, you ride them. Vosine ships do not ride currents, the commander said dismissively. Our technology is designed to create a stable environment regardless of external conditions. And that's why you're failing, Taikwu insisted. The core can't provide enough power to fight the current. But maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe we can work with the current instead of against it. Jin-Ho was looking at him with new interest. What are you suggesting? Adjust the stabilizers to flex with the current's patterns, not against them.